Good morning, everyone. We'll get this meeting started so that we can go home to our friends and family and work from home. Apologies. The apologies are we have a number of councillors working remotely who are unable to come in at the moment. So move that from the point of view of being present, Councillor O'Leary, Councillor Naidu-Rofe, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Thompson, Lachlan, apologies for this meeting, but they will still be speaking with us. Moved Councillor Bunting, seconded Councillor McPherson, all in favour. Post carried. Confirmation of the agenda, it is as circulated. Move that the agenda be received. Councillor Van Oosten, Councillor Pascoe, all in favour.
Aye.
Carried.
Aye.
No.
So now, are there any declarations of interest? There shouldn't be in relation to this. No. Being none. No public forum, of course. Now we'll get into the main paper, the only paper today. So the purpose for meeting today is to delegate some responsibilities to either the Chief Executive or a group of councillors and the Chief Executive, so that decisions that need to be made under urgency can be made and to keep council running effectively. And that's really important, that we do keep our City Council functioning and running the city effectively. So in that context, this will be, whatever we decide today, it will be relatively temporary, because we know that the Minister for Local Government and DIA are working actively as we speak to allow for remote voting, and as soon as that can be established, we will go back to running council meetings in the same way that they were run before, but virtually. So Becca can talk to you about what she can put in place to enable the chairs to run their subcommittees and me to run council. Obviously, we won't be wasting our time virtually on things that are non-urgent. We'll be just dealing with things that must ideally progressed or should, urgent. And the rats and mice things that we can make when we get together again will be deferred. Have you got anything to add to that, Becca?
No, pretty much exactly what Mayor Southgate has just described. So once the legislation comes in place to allow us to have audio-visual meetings, my proposal is, or my recommendation is, that we would just continue on as per normal with virtual committee meetings and council meetings. The committee advisors would liaise with the relevant chairs and the principal advisors to run that process. So we would still get agendas to you, we would still run the meeting, and then we would still get minutes out as per the normal process. There will be, as Paul has indicated, there would be a reduction of the reports that were coming as determined by SLT and the chairs. Richard, did you just want to have anything to add in relation to current workload for the organisation?
Yeah, so the organisation is just getting into the
Can you
groove.
put your microphone on, please?
The organisation is just getting in the groove of working from home. So I just asked for a little bit of understanding as we move into potentially a new world of virtual meetings, that it might take a while for us to get our rhythm up to speed. So there'll probably be less reports and more focused and priority reports coming through first. So just a degree of compassion and consideration is what I'm asking for as we... And likewise for you guys as well. I think working virtually is going to be a little bit harder than working in present as well, so we need to respect that for you guys as well.
So on that matter, and so that the public understand from this meeting, for the next 2 weeks we've cancelled any committee meetings, because obviously we're in unique times right now and everything has to settle into new ways of going. We will also be talking with each other as councillors every day via Zoom to make sure that we're across things that matter and that you have an opinion on. And we can call Zoom meetings to discuss things as they come up. We can be quite agile. And no matter where you decide to put your delegated authority this morning, in the Chief Executive or a small group, no matter what you do, I can assure you that I will be involving the full membership of council in the socialisation of important decisions. And although you can't formally vote, that doesn't mean I won't want to hear the voice of councillors. And in fact, I'll make every effort to do so through the various means that we have available to us. Questions? Councillor Mark.
Thank you. Just for perspective's sake, when you're talking about making decisions,
Can you give me some assurance that the nature of the decisions is going to be minimised over the next few months at this time?
Sorry, can I just interrupt? Mayor Paula, we having
can't
a
hear me?
little bit of trouble hearing people. If they can, we can hear you really well.
Oh, shall I repeat?
We can hear Richard really well. So if people can really
yep.
speak into their microphones,
Absolutely.
that would really help us.
Can you hear me there, Angela? Is that better?
You're a little bit. It's a little bit quiet and
So
muffled.
what say the councillors ask their question and
And you paraphrase
and I
it?
paraphrase it
Yeah.
back to you guys.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
thank you. My question was, can you just give me a guide to the nature of the kind of decisions that these new delegations will be making?
So Mark's question is about the nature and kind of decisions that could be made under the delegations.
Thank you.
Are we going to dive into the report, or do you want a general conversation? Because the report, Lachlan and Mothler are ready to present on the report, which will give a bit more detail.
Just,
I had a question that wasn't about that, it was about what the mayor's...
yeah, just in general, Richard, I guess for the overall perspective.
So my main focus is to keep the organisation running with least change as possible.
Yeah.
In terms of once we get ourselves being able to virtually meet, the decisions around that table will be the ones that really require attention. If I've got the delegated authority and it's a low impact decision, I'll just get on and do it and notify the relevant chair that it's happening. But for the most part, my goal is to get us up and running virtually as quick as we can and do a full democratic process. But the goal will be triaging the less important stuff out of the way, and only focusing on those ones that are going to turn the dial the most.
Righto.
Okay, so we're in the body of the report. Lachlan will speak.
I'm sorry, I've been trying to ask it,
Yes, I can see
not
you.
about the body of the...
No, I'm just saying that there will be further detail, if you let me finish. There'll be further detail in the body of the report about exactly what decisions could be made and which ones are exempt from being made with that delegation, which will be helpful. Councillor McPherson.
Could I ask, in terms of decision-making and things that are happening, even with speed, that, and the example is the committee meetings for the next 2 weeks being called off, to be the chair of a committee and find yourself sitting at home watching the cancellation of that committee come through on your phone was not, I would have rather have heard about that the day before at our gathering and had it been, I'm sure everyone would have agreed, I would have, but I'd rather have it done that way. So anything that's not a time crucial thing.
Noted, Councillor McPherson.
Yeah, and apologies for that. It was actually done relatively quickly to free up the calendar, and the only thing I agreed to, and yes, you say you should have been alerted, was the 2 weeks.
Yeah. Could I also ask why the city solicitor is sitting in front of a crowded Westpac stadium?
Yes, that's a very good backdrop. Yesterday, though, you looked quite surreal with the galaxy behind you.
Yes, today I'm at the MCG.
Okay. Virtually, folks, not really, because we would never be with that many people right now. So, okay, well, let's go into the body of the report and then have some questions. Who's talking to it?
I'm going to just hand it over to the team. So who wants to lead off, Mothler or Lachlan?
Sure, I can start off if that's helpful. So, following our discussion yesterday, where Lachlan talked through the two options we're proposing, you will have had an opportunity to read the report and read through those options in detail. It might perhaps be useful to move straight to questions, assuming that everybody's had a good chance to read the report, if that would be useful.
I was thinking we don't really need to go over the detail of the report again because we had a fulsome conversation yesterday, almost 2 hours actually, of conversation. So let's go through the questions and the questions at this stage, and then we'll go into some debate and discussion. I understand there are a couple of amendments or motions, I should say, because there's no motion being moved yet. So I'll get Becca to step us through that in a minute. But just in terms of the general report, any questions, please? Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question is around option 1 and specifically paragraph 6, D, E and F. And it's possible to read into that, and I'm not sure whether I'm taking it to an nth degree, but it's possible to work into that the Chief Executive has a series of options in terms of how he reports back to elected members and which of the group of elected members he might report back to. And I'm just wondering whether that was the intent, and secondly, whether or not D, a change to D could be considered, that's 60, to require the Chief Executive to report back within 5 working days of any decisions that he's made. And I'm thinking here not of the easy ones that he would make anyway. You know, we give him delegation every year at Christmas time while we're away. But I'm just a little bit concerned that this is different to Christmas, where he can easily defer some major decisions, pending everyone being back at the end of January. In this case, there may be some decisions that he may want, and I hope he does, want to talk to elected members about and certainly report back, instead of perhaps waiting for 6F, which requires him to give an overall report at the next full council meeting, which might, in these circumstances, be 6 weeks or 2 months away.
So I'll pick that up, team. So that's not an unreasonable request. I mean, I'm a fairly collaborative individual, so I mean, there will be a lot of heads up before significant decisions are made through the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and through elected members. We're making it very clear to the organisation even now that we are documenting all rationale for all decisions we make. And so as part of this process, any delegated authority that I utilise over and above my normal delegated authority, there will be well-documented rationale, and I can circulate that on a more frequent basis or put that somewhere so it's actually more readily available, or send it out weekly, monthly or fortnightly. I'm comfortable with all of that because I have to do it anyway, and it's entirely appropriate that that's shared with elected members. So it's really critical at this point of time, given what we're going through, that we document every decision we make, because in future there may well be questions about the decisions we have made in the context, whether it was appropriate or not. So we've been very diligent in documenting all decisions at the moment.
Okay.
Can I just add to that in terms of the process, Richard, just to be helpful, hopefully. The process that we would put behind Richard to support him would be similar to what we do now in terms of the information coming forward and then the minutes following any decisions being made. We're still required under legislation to be transparent in the decision-making process, so the governance process that would sit behind Richard or a delegated group would be very similar to what we're doing now. So we would be looking to get decisions out like we do now. So we put them up online 24 hours afterwards, we send them out and run that process pretty similar to what we have now. So we don't want to step too far away from that.
Just in terms of the hardship package that council and councillors are working through at the moment and the offerings that may be made, how do you plan to involve council over the next week or few days anyway, in terms of how we might move forward with some offerings of this hardship package?
So the question to those who are remote is how will the Chief Executive create a process so that we're involved in the decisions coming up in the next few days about hardship relief?
I intend to build a framework around the hardship package. So the framework will involve the extent to which I engage initially with elected members, get the flavour of where they're heading, what they're looking to do. So whilst the way I look at my delegated authority is there's some stuff I need to do to run the organisation, to look after the community and so forth, in terms of the general looking after the community, making sure the rubbish is collected and so forth. The hardship stuff over and above that is quite unique, and I do not intend to make calls on that without really intensive discussion with the elected wing. So we will set a framework up. Today's call about hardship Zoom meeting will be the first of probably many, as we quickly, I'll add the word quickly in here, refine a package that goes to the community. So you may well be delegating me authority to do the work, but you're not abdicating responsibility to get involved and help me do so. And so that'll be part of that process.
Thank you. All right. Well, on that basis, I'm happy to move. Recommendation. Just get the right words here. Recommendation option 1.
For the purposes of debate, I'll second that. I understand we have some other options.
Yes, I understand that some elected members may have some amendments to that motion that's just been put. Can you hear me?
So option 1 has been moved and seconded, but we understand there are at least 2 amendments to be put, so we're just calling for those now. Maxine?
Yes, thanks very much. I would like to put up on behalf of Sarah Thompson an amendment to number 6 that Councillor Pascoe has just talked about. I think you've got the wording up there, although we won't be able to put it up. Did you want to let people, read that out so that we have an understanding of what that is?
Why can't we put it up? I know that means we won't see the faces of councillors, but why can't we put it up at the
We
same
can put it up, we just won't see.
Are we not able to put it up on the other one?
You can't split. Well, I think as much as we've got a lovely bunch of faces looking at us there, I think it's more important to see the motion rather than... So you're going to disappear from face shortly, but I know you're still there, okay?
Yep.
So,
So we're just waiting for that. And meanwhile, Maxine, while we're putting it up, can you just explain? And this is something that has been worked up by Councillor Thompson, and Councillor Van Oosten has agreed to move it. We do need a seconder, but...
I'll second it pro forma to get it on the table.
Councillor McPherson is seconding it to get it on the table. Maxine, would you like to give us a little understanding of what you're proposing?
So in recent days, our discussions on our virtual channels have drawn us into an alternative way of working, and that we can do from distance, and that gives us the opportunity to really be able to continue the kinds of socialising of ideas, the talking through of options, the opportunities as elected officials to really be able to...
Just pause in that mid-flow, just while I see if I can... Did you hear that, councillors? Remote councillors? A little. So what Maxine is saying here is that in recent days, because we've had to start working remotely, we have demonstrated that we can undertake business and socialise key issues from a distance. Carry on.
Thank you. It's also our elected duty to perform in the very best ways using technology to do that.
It's also, in the elected member's opinion, our elected duty to continue to perform the actions that councillors should, but just do it in a different way.
Mayor Southgate, can the governance team, getting it up on the screen, email those of us who are at home the exact... Oh, here it is.
Okay, you've got it?
Oh, no, sorry, no, it's not. We just got to...
Yeah, that was from me.
Yeah.
I think that's my anticipating. I think that's the wording that's coming up on the screen, Angela.
Okay, we'll double check when we get to the wording ourselves. Let me just let Maxine finish her flow of explaining it.
Thank you. That we do have, when we are on those calls, have an equal opportunity to be able to talk, influence and potentially vote.
So those calls give us an equal opportunity to participate.
It would be removed potentially.
And if we go to a shortened line out, that would potentially be removed.
So I'd like to suggest that when the CE is making those deliberations, that he do consult a virtual meeting, as is suggested in here, that 24 hours or at least 24 hours notice be given of that, and that we can then talk about how we might like to communicate that notice.
Okay, hang on. So as per the motion, the motion is that the Chief Executive will communicate at least 24 hours ahead and allow councillors, as per the delegation described in the amendment, to influence that decision. If I've got that wrong, sing out, Max.
No, that sounds right. And so
So we need to deal with the motion,
We need to deal with this.
deal with the amendment that's on the table, and first, before we put another amendment, so.
Okay,
would you
can
still like to
we
put the amendment?
at least hear what the other one, can we, because otherwise we won't know what.
Yes,
We'll
Margaret.
foreshadow it and we can.
It'll be
hear-
foreshadowing an amendment, yes.
And Margaret is foreshadowing an amendment and we'll let her explain also what that might look like.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the amendment, basically, the body of the amendment is the same. The only thing that I'm proposing that we change is that the delegated group consists of 8 members, those being the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and chairs of each of the committees. And then there are...
Okay, let me just capture that one to the members that aren't here. So Margaret is saying that the amendment is essentially the same as the one you've just heard about, yeah?
Yes.
Except that it includes 8 elected members that the Chief Executive would have to work with.
Yes.
Does that have a seconder, Your Worship?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did, Councillor Taylor. But it's foreshadowed at this point anyway.
So just a reminder to our councillors that if someone wants to second the foreshadowed amendment, they cannot speak in debate.
Okay, so that's right. Understanding normal standing orders, if you...
Chair, could I suggest that we, and I'm happy to move it, that we suspend standing orders to enable a full and open debate given the circumstances?
Yep, I think that might be an idea.
I'll move it if you have.
Yep, we'll get there. So if somebody was to second the foreshadowed amendment, they would be excluded from debate. So Councillor McPherson is now proposing, putting up a vote that we suspend that standing order to allow the person who seconds the foreshadowed motion to also be involved in the prior debate. He's moved it. It's seconded by Councillor Van Oosten. We'll go to the vote. Your vote doesn't formally count, but obviously it counts to me. So, all in favour? All right. So everyone in the room. Anyone of you opposed to dropping that standing order? No. Okay. Thank you. So we're back to Margaret, who's explaining the foreshadowed amendment.
Thank you, Chair. The only, the contingencies are that should a chair be, or any member of the delegated group be unable to attend, able to take part in a virtual meeting, then the relevant deputy would become a member of that group, and should a deputy not be able to participate, then another deputy would be able to step in. It also, the minimum requirement is the same, that being 2, and the, do I need to,
No,
that's just the guts of it.
So everything else is the
Yeah,
same.
everything
It
else is
goes
the
to 8 members with the relevant chair, and the quorum is...
Not quorum,
not
minimum
quorum.
requirement.
The requirement is a minimum of 2 to be consulted with. So that's what we have up, but at the moment we have to go through some sort of process. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. Probably they're both legal questions, actually. I'm just trying to understand Councillor Thompson's amendment, just that last line around the ultimate decision will nevertheless rest with the Chief Executive. Do we legally have to have a quorum? Because this is obviously the amendment saying we don't. Can you just clarify that, whether we do or we don't have to stipulate a quorum number?
No, you don't need a quorum. We're not establishing a committee. This is simply a set of delegations either to one person or to a wider group, and there is no requirement for a quorum. So if, for example, you wanted to move away from a single delegation to the chief executive with a set of protocols around how he exercises them, and you wanted to move to a group of people who would have this delegation, that group can meet virtually. There's no requirement for a quorum. You can set your own rules around how you might make a decision, whether it's unanimity or consensus or whatever. Obviously, things get a bit more complex around that kind of decision making, which is why I've recommended option one as the cleanest and most nimble option.
Option one in the report.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
But option,
Yes,
Carry on.
option one in the report, but I think there's a foreshadow, or there's an amendment coming which is looking to amend, as I understand it, paragraph 6A of the report, which picks up on some of the suggestions that were made at the discussion yesterday.
so essentially the amendment is just including everyone, whereas the option one recommendation is a limited number of elected members. Is it? So why can we legally do the amendment with all elected members?
Well, let's be really clear on what we've got. Option one currently in the paper has got a delegation to the chief executive only, with the chief executive having a responsibility to confer with a small group. And that small group is described in paragraph 6A of the report. The amendment, which I think is on the board, if I'm assuming I've got the right one, is an amendment to 6A, which is extending that group to a wider group of elected members. So that's option one with its amendment. Option two
So
is...
just pause there a minute. Lachlan, to hate to start the flow, I just want to check with Becca because I can't read over my shoulder. That's right, the changes to 6A.
Yeah, so the amendment from councillors...
The amendment from Councillor Sarah and Maxine.
is what's up on the board now, which is that...
And the only change is?
The only change is what's up on the board there, which is the chief executive will exercise any one or all of the extended delegations from time to time, only after first allowing elected members, mangai and any external appointees from the relevant committee the opportunity to provide their views on the proposed decision.
So, yes, so what it does, let me just, because I know you won't hear, Becca. So what they're saying is that the amendment allows the chief executive to make decisions, but only after he has conferred with the wider membership.
Paula, so I was just going to say what's been emailed through is slightly different. It's changed E rather than A.
So I've emailed through the amendment and the foreshadowed amendment.
Oh, so you've got both the amendment and the foreshadowed amendment. So you're probably looking at Margaret's foreshadowed amendment, Sarah.
I just wanted to round up my question on that. So Lachlan, the reason on them looking at Sarah's amendment again, so what is the reason for at the end, the legal reason for at the end where it says clarity, the ultimate decision will nevertheless rest with the chief executive? Is that because of how we set up that delegation?
That's right. So what that sentence does is it really confirms that that's exactly what option one is pursuing, which is a single delegation to the chief executive. And so the final sentence in that paragraph is just reinforcing that, yes, there will be this broader consultation and conferring with the wider group, but at the end of the day, the decision to exercise the delegation sits with the chief executive. That's the fundamental principle that sits in behind option one, compared to option two, which has got a delegation to a broader group.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Councillor McPherson.
Yes, I'm just wondering through you a question to the CE. If looking at points E and F in option one, which is recording the decisions exercised under this delegated authority proposed and providing a report, whether that could be tweaked or could it be read as the CE comes on the next daily elected members call to explain any decisions he's had to make, or even subject to timing, because it's my concern with the amendment is the 24-hour notice. It may not be possible. If timing's possible, come on in advance. If it's not possible, come on the following meeting to explain. So I'm just wondering whether that's practical from the CE's viewpoint.
Okay, so let me just translate for those at home what Dave is asking. If the option 1, E and F, which require the Chief Executive to report back, can be clearer to make it certain that he would report back via the next elected member Zoom virtual meeting as soon as practical rather than at any point in time. So the very next day if he can, and if that's not practical, soon after. So there's not too much of a lag between his decision making.
Or come on in advance if timing permits.
Or come on in advance if time permits, so that before the Chief Executive makes a decision, if the time permits, and he can rustle up a Zoom conference, he does that. If he makes a decision because he has to make it right there and then, within the shortest period of time, he comes onto a Zoom conference and lets us know.
Our regular Zoom conferences.
Our regular one, because we're having one.
No special meetings.
Yeah, no, because we're having one every day, so that gives that chance for the Chief Executive to tell us what he's been doing. I'm just going to ask Richard to respond to that. I see you, Ewan. I'll come to you shortly. Richard.
Yes. Yes, I can do that. I mean, that's reasonable, and I'd expect to do that anyway. I want to be involved in as many of these elected member Zoom meetings as possible, because it's important for me to hear your themes so that I can reflect those back into the organisation.
So Chief Executive says yes, he wants to be as collaborative as possible in making all the decisions. Dave, are you thinking that needs a word tweak, or?
Well, perhaps not, because I'm thinking if that could be the way you read E and F, or that the CE explained that's how he's going to implement E and F.
So yes. Dave is comfortable that E and F allow for that to happen without any further wording changes.
That was exactly my question.
So I'm going to move down some...
get an indication as to how you would interpret that.
Yeah, so hang on, let's go down the list of questions. Ryan, you've dropped off, you're satisfied? I've got Ewan and I've got Margaret for questions at this time. Ewan first.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Paula. Look, mine was 2 questions. First, to the Chief Executive, I just want to get clarity in terms of option 1 or option 2. From your leadership point of view, I just want, are you comfortable, is option 1 your preferred option, or are you finding some solace with the idea of not being on your own in that delegated decision-making process at option 2? I know it's a strange question, but I just want to get an understanding from you personally.
Yeah, so firstly, option 1 is recommended in these times. We're under a significant different environment that we've ever operated under, and I don't necessarily believe that in all cases we can get together, the bigger the committee we try to get together, the harder it is going to be to get that committee together and make decisions. So
can you pause after every little block so I can catch up?
Okay.
So Chief Executive says that option 1 is ordinary is usual under these extraordinary times, and there will be moments where getting everyone together would be impractical.
Yep. So my recommendation is my recommendation as per the report is for option 1. Having said that, I've heard the comments around this table, and I will continue to be the collaborative Chief Executive I've always been, and very communicative in terms of the decisions I've made.
So he believes that option 1 is the right option. Having said that, he intends to be as collaborative as he has been and continue in that way of working with councillors as far as practical.
Thank you. And Your Worship, my second question was to you, and it's a procedural question.
Sure.
I was under the impression today that those that are dialing in remotely were going to have the ability to vote.
Yeah, that might be so. Yes, you're right. Sorry, you're right. And I realised that earlier on I might have been misinformed on that.
Because you, in your intro, you said
I did. I apologise.
Excluding us from the meeting, and then you said, although you were
I know, so I'm correcting that at this point in time. Thank you for making that clear. So yes, you can
Correct.
vote.
So we're not an apology to the meeting, and yes, we do vote.
No, that's right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. It's new times and we're learning curve is steep.
Yep. No, I fully understand.
Margaret.
Clarification around the foreshadowed amendment. It's different to what I verbalised.
So Margaret's saying the foreshadowed amendment is not quite as she verbalised, so we're just fixing that now. Hold on.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So it should read that the intent of it is that the committee, the delegated group, is comprised of, as I described earlier, the mayor, deputy, and the 6 chairs. A deputy would only be involved should a chair not be unavailable. So the amendment at the moment says, and the deputy chair of relevant committee to exercise. So that includes the deputies, but
have you got that, team?
That's only if the chair is unavailable.
So the foreshadowed amendment, so everyone is clear, is very similar to the other options, except that it requires a delegation of 8 to be involved in the conversation at the very least, which is the mayor, the deputy mayor, the chairs. Am I not got that right yet? Chairs. Only two, but it comprises that group.
Yeah.
So it comprises the group of the chair, the mayor, the deputy mayor, the chairs of the relevant committee, and if only those chairs of the relevant committee can't do it for whatever reason, the deputy chair of that committee, but it defaults to only 2 of those being necessary, depending what's going on. That's right.
Well, there is provision also that if, let's say, all the deputies go down, or whatever case might be, then any other deputy appointed by the mayor can come in and which is similar to the last.
So if any of us become unwell or for some reason are unavailable, we can default to the deputies.
Any other deputy.
Any other deputy.
Yeah.
But you've got it in front of you now. Is that now reading as it should, Margaret?
Yes, thank you.
It's now reading as it should. You have it in front of you. Does everybody understand that? It's like Chinese whispers having to translate, but I'm doing my best.
Doing a good job.
Okay, so now we are going... Sarah? Yep.
Just a question to Lachlan and Mothler in regards to the amendment that Councillor Maxine and I have put forward, or the motion, sorry. Do you see any issues with the 24-hour notice period at this stage?
That's to the Chief Executive, did you say?
Oh no, to Lachlan and Mothler and Richard as well would be just helpful to get that viewpoint. It does say we are reasonably practicable, I think. Ultimately, there's that option, but just keen to get views.
Lachlan first.
I think the current drafting refers to the reporting back being at the first reasonable opportunity, or reasonable practicable, or language like that. My preference would be to keep it as flexible as possible and not prescribe exactly when, because inevitably, there could be problems. If you are going to impose some sort of 24-hour expectation, I think it needs to be imposed with the flexibility of, or as quickly as reasonably possible in the circumstances. I think if you combine it with that as a bit of a get out of jail card, I think it'll work. But if it's a hard-edged deadline, I think it worries me.
Would it be, could we get a suggestion, and depending on Councillor Maxine, who's moved this, but maybe a suggestion for wording that which allows flexibility but indicates a desire to get as much notice as possible so that people can attend any meeting?
Okay, I'll let staff think about that while I take the remainder of the questions. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. Just so I'm 100% clear on all of these motions and options and amendments and foreshadowed, what I'm seeing here is primarily the difference between the 2 options that staff have put up the foreshadowed amendment that Councillor Forsyth has put up and Councillor Thompson's one, the difference between the Sarah Maxine one and the others is that the others allow some elected members to make a decision, whereas Councillor Thompson's, the input from elected members is in a consultation capacity. But no decision, there's no mandate, there's no decision of elected members in Sarah's amendment.
No, that's right, isn't it, Lachlan? Because at the moment that's impractical. We cannot get in the same room until that same room thing changes to virtual reality. We can't, but we can pressure through the wording of, and I think this is what the intent is for both the amendment and the foreshadowed amendment. Place pressure on an expectation for the Chief Executive to widely consult within a decent period of time. But
I think I got the answer because Lachlan nodded his head. Yeah. It's not about being in the same room because all of the options in front of us remove us from being in the same room. But the fundamental difference is with Sarah's, our capacity is being consulted. With all of the others on the table, some elected members at least make a decision. Yeah. That's quite a significant difference.
So Lachlan, so you're saying we would have to reach, with those other, the amendment and the foreshadowed amendment, we'd have to reach a consensus decision of that group before the Chief Executive could do something. That's not what you. That's not what you said to before. You said that he talks with us and he can make his decision.
Yep. So that's the fundamental difference between option 1 and option 2 and Councillor Forsyth's signalled suggestion. So option 1, let's be really, really clear. The decision and the delegation rests with Richard only. He has a consultation obligation. Currently it is that drafted at clause 6A of the staff report, but with Councillor Thompson's amendment, 6A is going to be potentially extended out and enhanced, if you like, to capture a broader group of elected members who Richard will consult with. So that is as I understand it, that is the current amendment to option 1, and that extension of the consultation group that Councillor Thompson is signalling also has that final sentence which makes it very clear that at the end of the day it is still a delegated authority to the Chief Executive and the Chief Executive only. That is option 1. Option 2 is in the staff report, and it is that the delegation is extended to Richard and a small group, and I suspect that Councillor Thompson might also have a potential amendment to clause 11A of the staff report, which is the equivalent to 6A for option 2. And then the third option, which is the one that Councillor Forsyth is signalling, is basically option 2, but enhanced, so that the group of councillors and the Chief Executive who will be given delegated authority is in fact even wider than is suggested in option 2. So it's a series of escalating options, if you like.
All clear?
No, that's not my intent.
That's not the intent.
Question, if I could, Your Worship.
Hang on, Margaret's going to is saying that that's not quite the intent. Can you clarify what your intent is? And then we can get Lachlan to comment on it. And then I see you, Ewan, I'll come to you.
The intent of the foreshadowed amendment is that a delegated group, which has been described as the Mayor, Deputy and 6 chairs, has the delegated authority to make decisions.
So her intention is that a delegated group has the authority to make the decisions.
Yes, I understand that.
But it's not as wide, it's middle ground. So it's not the CEO and it's not 12 councillors, the Mayor and 4 or 5 Māngai Māori. It's at its maximum 8.
And it's not as wide, but it would be at its maximum 8. But Lachlan, What's the ramifications of that? Because practically we can't make a delegated decision by 8 of us, can we? We can inform it.
Well, you do that at a full council meeting all the time, but effectively that's what a group of 8 would be confronted with. You'd have to work out some rules. I don't know. Do you want to adopt the standing orders of council and bring them into the group? You can make your own rules, but you can see where that all leads.
Okay, so you're talking about just the practicality of making decisions in a timely fashion like that would be a problem.
Yep, absolutely. So there's no legal impediment as an idea. There's nothing legally wrong with it, but it carries with it a series of implications around how you make that group work and what the rules of engagement are going to be.
Okay. Oh, Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. I don't think Councillor Sarah's question got answered of Richard in terms of the 24-hour potential restriction.
So Councillor Hamilton would like to have an answer from the Chief Executive in respect to that 24-hour requirement of Councillor Sarah.
So my biggest concern is we're in extraordinary times. So we have got a need to go fast. I've been accused of going too fast by some elected members and not going fast enough by others over the last wee while as we're trying to get the organisation up and running and trying to achieve some outcomes. My concern is if I've got to think about a 24-hour period of time where I've got to call together a group of elected members and a decision needs to be made quickly, some elected members will think that I should wait 24 hours because they want to be involved in the conversation, and some elected members will think that I should just get on with it. For me, having very clear and unambiguous rules makes life a lot easier. The other challenge...
Okay, well, you've so much so fast, I've got to translate.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about them.
So for Richard, the 24-hour is difficult from the point of view that it could constrain his ability to make the sort of speedy decisions that he needs to may need to make. And talking at the moment about how he's had to make some very fast decisions to match the times and doesn't want necessarily to disappoint council with being too slow or too fast. So the difficulty would be if the requirement was 24 hours, some councillors might feel that we do need to wait the 24 hours to give everyone a say, and that could be a problem.
Yep, it could be.
I think
Sorry, he's still answering.
We've got a lot of people still, and I am trying to get through everyone fairly, so let Richard finish. I'm just can't translate more than 3 sentences at a time, so off you go, Richard.
And the last part is getting together. I think Councillor Forsyth's foreshadowed amendment makes some sense. I have no issue with it, but I think it needs to be coupled with some delegated authority of the Chief Executive, because there will be a situation where we need to make a decision quickly. We can't get everyone together in the right room to make that decision, and we'll effectively not make a decision, or I'll have to make a decision without delegation, which puts me in an exposed position.
Okay, so hang on. So Richard thinks that Margaret's foreshadowed amendment does have some sense in it because of it being a constrained group. Having said that, there will be times when he would have to make a decision potentially outside of his delegation, which would put him in a very unsafe position. So there would need to be, in Margaret's option, there would still need to be, under extraordinary circumstances, the ability for the Chief Executive to make a decision quite quickly. And Margaret's happy to amend her foreshadowed amendment to that effect. So the intention now is of the foreshadowed amendment that Richard can still make an ultimate decision, but he should consult with the 8 people as defined in her recommendation.
It's almost like tranche 2 in this case.
So it's like in between what we had from staff and what we had with Sarah's broader option. Everybody understanding that? Kesh? Oh, sorry, hang on. Not Kesh. Ewan, I think you've been waiting.
No, Your Worship, my question's been answered in the dialogue.
Okay, thank you. Kesh?
Hi, just for clarity, with option 2 and option 3, does the delegated group still, like, to make decisions, would they still have to meet physically?
Oh,
No.
But so you're allowed to make decisions virtually if it's a smaller group?
You're allowed to make decisions virtually if it's a bigger group. It just becomes less agile, less flexible and more cumbersome in terms of the trying to get out to all 13 members in a timely fashion.
I think the difference between...
But you still have to reach consensus.
Hang on a minute.
The difference is it's not classed as a committee under standing orders, it's a group.
So it's not a committee, it is a delegation, a group. So yes, you can put the difference? Okay.
Gotcha.
Councillor Mark.
Sorry, Maxine, I was just, okay. Just a quick question of Richard, and just trying to keep this thing in a global perspective. Have there been any decisions that you've had to make? I mean, you've had to make some pretty fast ones now. Have there been any that have been impeded by us not being here anyway?
Put it this way, I closed the facilities down because my delegated authority to do so.
Yep.
To get all the elected members together to have that conversation about that would have been difficult because I needed to do it quickly.
Yeah.
But having said that, it was already within my delegated authority.
Yeah, exactly. So how, sorry, if they're hearing this, are they the kind of decisions that these committees, subcommittees, groups, life-threatening? Are they? Can you still operate the business without?
For the most part, I can operate the business. The exceptions will be when I need to probably vary contracts and so forth to allow extraordinary actions outside existing contract requirements beyond my delegated authority, and to some extent like that.
Yeah.
That potentially could be the challenge. To be fair, I'm hoping that it's, I know it's not business as usual, but I'm hoping the business as usual operations can continue.
Yeah.
And I can work with any of these options in front of me.
Yeah.
However, till that one item that pops up that I can't think of right now, where we've got to act quickly,
Yeah.
and then suddenly we've got to get a committee structure together or a group together,
Yeah.
there is a challenge.
I just want to challenge you on that a wee bit, and that we're all going to be at home. We're all going to be near our computers. So is it really going to be an issue to not get us together? It's as quick as a text, really, because we're not going to be doing anything else.
Well, what I'm thinking as I'm thinking through this conversation is that we set up a standing meeting every day.
Yeah.
And we just don't come to it if it's not needed. I'll send you a text saying, don't need it.
Right.
But if you do need it, you just show up in the meeting. I mean, we can make this thing work. I can make, you know me, nothing's impossible. Some things are just quite impractical, but I'll make it happen.
Yeah.
You know, so the easiest option is just trust me, let me get on with it. Second option is trust me to support you to make a decision.
Yeah.
And it's all about this cascade of trust, right?
Yeah, of course. Okay. Thank you, Richard. Thanks.
Max.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thank you, Richard, for the discussion around the 24-hour notice period. I think what we can see up on the board there is in brackets immediately after it, bolded, where practical / possible, and I think that's a really sensible addition to that wording and would meet the sorts of things that you've just talked about. I think we are already falling into the practice of having
so
a virtual meeting as well. So, it's just about a clarification around that wording, and that, you know, we do support that coming up.
That's the question.
Max was just talking, it wasn't really a question, but a clarification that where practicable and possible allows for that flexibility in all of those options. I have a question from Councillor Ewan. Ewan?
Thank you, Your Worship. Question to the Chief Executive. Richard, if the foreshadowed amendment was to proceed, or in fact if option 2 was to proceed, both of which are a smaller group of council, how would you manage communication with the balance of duly elected members having been left out of the democratic process?
I'm going to treat that as a black and white question rather than a leading one, Councillor Wilson. So basically, Becca responded earlier about the fact that we'll support those meetings with the governance processes that are already in place, so there'll be communication protocols out of it. What I hope is that I can circulate a short memo on any decision that's required up front beforehand, so there'll be a mini agenda, so at least there's some context for every elected member to see prior to the meeting, even if they're not involved in the debate or the discussion or decision on it.
So
Becca.
what he's saying, let me try and capture that, is that he would propose in advance a mini type of agenda and circulate that to all members so that they could think about what was coming up and talk with their chairs and so on to bring that into the discussion.
Thank you. My second question is to Lachlan.
Ewan, can I just answer as the mayor on the tenure of that question? That is my absolute pledge that I am going to use the full group of councils wherever practical, all of the time.
If I could just maybe add some clarification to the process. Richard would still require to receive information from staff to make an informed decision on a matter that is a council decision under his delegation. So staff would still be required in some form to bring forward a memo. My thinking around the process would be that we would still compile some kind of agenda with decisions that were needing to come, and that would be circulated to all elected members as well.
So,
and then he would be, sorry, yep.
Yeah, so what Becca's saying is that because it is a decision of council through the chief executive, there would be the usual setting up of agendas and information to inform that, which, right? Yeah.
Yes,
and?
Yeah, so we would still compile a document of such that would be circulated. Richard would then make a decision in consultation with the group or with whatever you guys decide here, and then governance would follow up with information as to what that decision was.
So there would still be an agenda, a body of information, irrespective of which of these options we land on, and the decision would be reported back as well. So that formality of an ordinary meeting still prevails. Yeah?
Yes.
I think I answered that. Okay, we need to make some progress on this now. I think we've had a long discussion on it yesterday. We've got 3 clear options. We're going to go into the debate, and I think everybody will want to talk, so bear with me. I may start with the mover and the seconder of each one, of the one that we're dealing with at the time. We're going to take the amendment and the other motion, which is option 1. Should the amendment fail, the foreshadowed motion will come to the table. So as we go around the room, I'm going to be reasonably relaxed in standing orders as to where you indicate your support, just because I think it would be helpful.
Sorry, can I just clarify, we do the amendment, then the foreshadowed amendment, then the motion?
Yeah, that's right. So that's one. Yeah. So we do the amendment, we do the foreshadowed amendment, and then we do the substantive motion. So it all cascades down like that. So I intend to be reasonably flexible in terms of the debate and not constrain it too much at all, because I think it's really important. So we're going to go with, yes.
For a point of clarification.
Sure.
If the amendment fails,
The foreshadowed
amendment becomes the amendment.
Yeah.
If the amendment passes, it becomes the motion, and then does the foreshadowed amendment get on the
That's
table
right.
anyway?
That's
okay.
exactly right.
Thank you.
So if the it's
we
not
don't vote on the foreshadowed amendment.
no, that's right.
Yeah.
No, he's saying if the amendment fails, the foreshadowed amendment becomes the discussion.
Yes.
If the amendment passes, it becomes the substantive motion, and we vote accordingly. Yeah. So that's the process. And then the foreshadowed amendment would not get to come to the table, right?
Thank you.
Can I ask a question, Mayor Paula, of
Yes.
the lawyer?
Of the lawyer?
Of the lawyer? Lachlan, are you there, mate?
I am.
Okay, cool. Hey, so let's say Councillor Forsyth's motion goes forward. We've got this, well, it's the same as the other options as well, an empowered group to make a decision.
Hang on.
Wait.
Okay,
Yes, you did. You did talk about.
Okay,
say
Lachlan.
Say one of those options goes, and you have a group. Any one of those options goes forward, and you have to consult with the group.
If there is a reason that group can't effectively make the decision, can that group delegate their authority to the chief executive?
If for any reason that group can't make a decision, can they delegate their authority to the chief executive? My understanding is that is allowed for in each option.
You'll have to delegate the power to delegate. So the current, I don't think the current proposal addresses that point. You'd have to make that expressly stated within the resolution.
So for both the amendment and the foreshadowed amendment, to make that possible, there'd need to be a clause that says, if it were not possible to bring this group together, the authority goes to the chief executive.
I think just...
Is that what you're saying, Lachlan?
No, no.
only-
Sorry, the question I thought that I was asked was, could the subgroup delegate their decision making to a further subgroup, in this case the chief executive? And the answer to that is yes, provided the full council's delegation to that subgroup includes a power to delegate.
Can I just...
Becca's going to comment
if I
too.
may provide some assistance here. What we're talking about would only need to be added to Councillor Forsyth's foreshadowed amendment.
Yeah.
I have asked Mothler to provide some wording to add to that.
Okay.
Just to cover what Richard's talking about.
Right, so that's
Yeah.
the intention, is to add those words into Councillor Forsyth's foreshadowed amendment, Lachlan. Okay?
Okay.
Which is already in Sarah Max's amendment. Does that answer your
Well,
question?
no, I think we're talking about two different things here. I just want to try and be clear. As I understand Councillor Thompson's amendment, it's an amendment to option 1,
Yeah,
and option 1 includes a delegation to the chief executive
Yes.
only.
Correct.
yeah,
Councillor Thompson's amendment to option 1 extends the group of the consultation group,
yeah,
but it also reinforces the message that at the end of the day,
Yeah.
this is a delegation to the chief executive.
that's right. So that one's safe in the respect that it
So
defaults.
that's that.
Yeah,
Option 2 and Councillor Forsyth's signalled option is a delegation to a wider group.
yes,
So you can't have a delegation to the wider group and then also include a provision that says, but at the end of the day, the decision rests with Richard, because those are two different things. If you want the delegation to the wider group to have a further layer of cascade where that wider group can then, if circumstances require it, have to then put the decision-making power in the hands of one member of the group, then that group needed to have the delegated authority to sub-delegate.
yeah. And that is Margaret's intention.
All right. Well, if that's the intention, then borrowing the words from Councillor Thompson's amendment, the last sentence,
I've got
I don't
some
think
words
quite
ready to
does
go
it. I think
up
you
on the
need
board.
to square up to that
The only reason...
accurately in the drafting of Councillor Forsyth's suggested resolution
this is
to make it expressly stated that this delegation includes an express power to sub-delegate.
So,
to the
okay,
chief.
so I think there's people talking across each other here. So yes, I understand what you mean. If we were to give Richard the option to delegate under the regime that Margaret is proposing, would have to do some wording, additional wording. We get that.
Yeah, okay, so,
would like to
the
talk on that.
reason I suggested this is I step right back, the committee does its role, or the group does its role, acts as the authority for the council, and it's only if that group can't stand up, or they see they can't stand up, they delegate to me to pick it up. I don't get involved otherwise.
Well, that's right. So what's he, did you hear that, Lachlan? What Richard is saying is that the group, under Margaret's option, the group would do the work, make the decisions. If for some reason that group can't stand up and do that, then it would go to Richard. So that's what he's saying, and what I hear you saying, I think, is that there would need to be some wording to that effect in Margaret's foreshadowed amendment.
Yes, so if I understand the proposition, Richard's not part of the first delegated group.
Is he not?
Well, that's what he just said. He said he wouldn't participate in the first round,
No.
effectively.
No. Okay. Okay, cool. All right, well, that's understood. So, Margaret, ask a question of you. Are you prepared to add a sub-delegation in if that group can't get together?
Yes, that's fine. Under extreme circumstances, there is provision for a minimum of 2 members of that delegated group to make a decision anyway, but in the event that 2 people can't stand up and there's no one around, then this would mean that the CEO or any other such person that is still around, if you're not here, has the ability to make a call.
Okay, Lachlan, did you hear that? Or do I need to say that? So what Margaret's saying, so if the 8 can't come together, there's a default to the 2, which is already in there.
Oh,
yeah.
Minimum, yes.
The minimum of 2. And if the minimum of 2 can't do it, she is happy that we make a further wording that the chief executive can then step in. Is that right, Margaret?
Yeah,
okay. That's the intention.
Levels of minimising risk, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay, so that's clear. So, Lachlan, do we have the words to make that clear? Is Margaret's... No. So what needs to go in there, please, could you work on that while we debate the other amendment? Can somebody work on the words?
Yeah. I'm working on that now, and I'll send it to Lachlan and Becca.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, clear as. Goodness me. And I suppose that does show how complicated it is to work sometimes through groups. Let's go into the discussion, which of course is on the amendment, which has been moved by Councillor Councillor Thompson and Councillor Van Oosten. If this stacks up, we don't go any, that becomes a substantive. If it doesn't, the substantive, which is option 1 in the staff report, would stack up with a further foreshadowed amendment coming in between, most likely. So let's go to...
Sorry, Paula, could I just ask a question, just a
Sure.
clarification? So basically we all debate all 3 options at the same time then go to the vote?
I think we debate all 3 options at a time because I think it's easier, or you can talk to it, but obviously talk very firmly to your preferred option so we get guidance. So we're going into the discussion, and to make it easier, I'm just going to go around every councillor. If you don't want to discuss, don't. If you do, you do. But we'll start with Sarah because she is the mover of the amendment.
The motion goes first.
Maxine
hang on,
moved
wait, sorry.
And I seconded.
The mover of the motion goes first, which is me. No, it's not. It's Rob. Okay. Okay, so Rob, you get to go first.
So I get to go first. Well, that's unusual, but I will go first. Thank you, Chair. Look, I accept that we are, in this instance, delegating significant and unfettered powers to the Chief Executive. I think that the amendments are tending to be a little more prescriptive, and whilst I would support these, I think the undertakings that we've had from the Chief Executive today work for me.
Pause. So, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember.
Can we just move the screen there, Paula?
I don't know. We're going to try and find a way that you can hear all this because otherwise I'm trying to subtitle everything. We're going to move the screen around. Oh, well, we're going to move the screen around to the speaker each time so you can sit here.
Do you want
Everybody
me to,
happy?
I'll move this. Yeah, I'll move that.
That is so much easier.
Hello, everyone. I guess we haven't got 3 minutes today. We can talk for as long as we like.
No.
We didn't change that standard.
Okay, off you go.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Look, I'll go back to the start again. I accept that today we are offering, that we're delegating significant and unfettered powers to the CE. I think that the amendments tend to make these powers a little more prescriptive, and I would support the motion given the undertakings that we've had from the Chief Executive. They seem to work for where I think his decision needs might be. We also need to take care, if we're going to limit the powers of delegation, that he doesn't actually lose those and it leaves the CE in some instances under some pressure and unable to make decisions. I have confidence in the present Chief Executive and his deputy that they will exercise the powers that we're giving them in the motion today with restraint, and bearing in mind that undertaking that he's given to us throughout, that he would provide and seek advice prior to any major decisions. And I think we're going to have to make some quite significant decisions, financial and otherwise, over the next few weeks. we need flexibility and we need powers of delegation, giving, in this instance, the CE the ability to act.
Thank you.
Sorry, my last comment was, in the event that a majority of council disagree with the decision of the chief executive, a properly convened council meeting could rescind the delegation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take Max next. I'll take Sarah next as the mover of the amendment, and then I'll just go around the room. So Sarah is next. It's not what it shows up here, is it?
I'm comfortable either way.
All right.
So my intent behind the amendment was essentially to provide everyone a fair, equal opportunity to have input into decision making while keeping the process simple and agile. I think that all of us have been elected by the public to have a voice on matters, and it's our we should be able to have that position even in extraordinary times like this. But the amendment also recognises that, say, 24 hours may not be fully practicable, so there's flexibility there. There's also the ultimate flexibility that Richard may not be able to practicably convene with all of us before making a decision, and in an extraordinary time, say if there is a real reason for that, then that flexibility is there also. But I think it is really simple. If we have daily meetings, then everyone who is available can join those meetings and give input onto decisions before they go ahead. If this amendment doesn't go forward, then I'm most comfortable with then moving to option 1. But yeah, I think this gives everyone the fairest input and is the flattest structure in terms of decision making.
Thank you, Sarah. I might take my moment next and then go around the room. At the end of the day, I have seconded the option 1 at this time because this is a matter of getting work done as effectively and efficiently as possible. And there's a I'll start again, sorry. Okay, sorry. I'm just going to take my turn next. These are times when getting things done as efficiently and as effectively as possible is very important. We have to have a level of trust. I think it would be very foolish for Richard to make far-reaching decisions outside of the support of the council. I don't believe he would want to do that, but I do believe there are some everyday matters of business, contracts and the like that must go ahead. I can give councillors the best assurance that we'll be talking daily using all the technology available to us, calls, emails and our Zoom conferences, and I will be endeavouring to make sure you're across all decisions that are coming to us, because I do value your voice in the discussions that we're having. I believe that this arrangement around delegation will be temporary. We've heard clear messages from DIA and we've heard clear messages from Nanaia Mahuta that this will change, that she wants to enable local government to get powered up to keep doing its business. Luckily, this doesn't have to go through full legislative change, as explained to us yesterday. It can go through the Governor-General, it can go through a special process that speeds it up. I know most councils, including ours, are on the back of DIA every day saying, help us to get on being the elected members that we are. And I continue to support that. In terms of the biggest decisions that we're going to make shortly, later on this afternoon, to start that discussion around hardship, rates, packages, other ways we might support businesses in the community, we absolutely will be involved in that decision. And I can't see that there'd be one reason why Richard would want to go against the grain of what council sees, because then he would have all of us members on every form of social media or opportunity available to us calling him out on that. So, you know, look, I commit to talking with you regularly. Richard commits to talking with you regularly. And I think in this instance, we need to do the rational, sensible thing. There are a couple of councils who have gone into emergency committees. They're kind of flying outside of the rules, but we'll see what happens to that. But look, we can work cohesively and we can work collaboratively. We're proving that now, and we proved that yesterday. Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor Paula, I'm confused. Are you with Sarah's or
option
are you
one.
with option one?
I seconded it. I think I said that.
Oh, okay, option one.
Yeah, at this point in time, out of the two options that we're discussing mostly. I'm going to go round the group and take the people who are remote first because I'm looking at you. So Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Mayor Southgate. Yeah, look, it's a difficult one, and at any point in time, I'm uncomfortable with having my elected responsibilities reduced, because we are the voice of the people that we represent. We are the people's voice. But in saying, and I guess having those reduced to just having a consultation input, which is the amendment, Councillor Thompson's amendment, sits a little bit uncomfortably with me. But I do like the fact that everybody's voice around the table gets heard. So at this stage, I'm going to support the amendment, and if that fails, then I will support the motion. This obviously, as the Mayor has said, places a huge level of trust onto whatever actually gets passed today, whether it's a delegated group or whether it's the CEO. So I just want to ensure that trust is there. It also means that no matter what gets passed today, we all actually have to trust each other. Now is not the time, and I'm not hearing it anyway, but now is not the time for politicking. Now is not the time to be precious. Now is the time for us to make sure that we do whatever we can to look after the people that we're in charge of looking after. So, look, I'm supportive of all of the work that we've managed to do today, even remotely, and I want to thank the Mayor for that, and also want to thank the governance team. I think you've done a great job. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. Look, I agree with what Angela has just said. Let's be clear, I have total faith in Richard Briggs, our Chief Executive. I think he's competent, he's smart, and he will do the right thing. But I do not want to surrender my elected obligations, and what Sarah and Maxine's motion achieves is the best of both. It empowers the Chief Executive to be agile and nimble and make decisions immediately if required, but it also places an obligation on him to broadly consult with elected members. What is not to like about that? It continues to empower the very thing that we all stood for, which was a democratic process. If the amendment is unsuccessful, then I would also live with option one, because I'm confident that Richard would do the job. What I would not support under any circumstances is a creation of a mechanism where some elected members are elevated above everybody else. The Mayor is first among equal, and I respect that, but I don't see this elevation of chairs above deputies. I think we would be on a slippery slope, and it would be an erosion of democracy, and I think we all want to protect that, particularly in this time of crisis. So I fully support Maxine and Sarah's amendment. I think it's well thought out. I think it gives the Chief Executive the ability to be agile, while it still includes all of us in at least a discussion process.
Thank you, Ewan. Councillor Naidu-Rove.
Thank you. So from my understanding, the majority of decisions that would be coming to council in the foreseeable future would be ones that are time critical. And so from my understanding, my preference would be to reduce barriers to make the decision-making process as simple as possible. And it would only be for short term, because as everyone's mentioned, rules are changing and we'll all be back to virtual decision making in a short period of time. So I'm comfortable that all our views will be taken into consideration with option one, with the amendment of option one. And like a couple of you have mentioned, it is based on trust. So I will be supporting the amendment put forward by Sarah and Maxine.
Councillor Thompson? Oh, of course, you did already. I'm just looking at the screen. Apologies. I will get the hang of this probably just before we all come back together in real form.
You're doing a good job, Paula. Today, I think it's going smoothly.
Yes, not going too bad. Okay, so Maxine. Thank you. Hang on, we're taking the screen away now. The man with the gloves. Yes. Okay, it's going over to Councillor Van Oosten for her comment, her discussion.
Thanks very much, and thank you, Sarah, for the work that you did to get our thinking to expand further. I'll be supporting option one with the amendment. I think that a flat structure that is workable is really key at the moment, and our CEO, Richard, must have the ability to be able to act with pace when needed. With the amendment further to practicable and possible around the 24-hour notice timeframe, I think is a really useful addition to the wording. However, I also think that collaboration is key as well, and it's really important to me. We've demonstrated that already we can get together via our Zoom channels, and all of us have input in an equal and open way. Mayor Paula, I applaud you for the leadership that you're taking around that and offering all of us the opportunity to be involved in that decision making and information sharing. That's really important, and that's the sort of thing that our residents really require of us. They need to, through this process, still feel that they have a voice in decision making that's happening, and the ability to be able to get to their elected officials is critical. It's a way for us, though, to be working differently, and as the times demand, we need to be showing that flexibility as well. Richard's already expressed his comfort with those calls, and I think also with the addition of the augmented mini agendas and discussion papers, and the general way of business is to stay standard is important also. I see this being really for a very short time, actually. I've full confidence in Minister Nanaia Mahuta being able to respond to councils around the country and to be able to come up with solutions that will help us to be able to make these decisions as a committee again, taking into account the different environment that we are in. So in closing, I fully support our CE to be able to, in the short term, take up the delegations that we talk about with the amendments that also involve us in being in that decision-making process or in the advisory group. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
just tilting the screen to get my best side.
Turn around.
Are you turning around?
Okay, thank you. Look, I think we all want the same sort of outcome. We want to be nimble. We want elected members to be able to have a say like we were elected to do. The circumstances have forced us to make a couple of choices, but I actually don't think they're that far apart. Where I'm coming from, I'm supporting the motion, option 1, but I could live with the amendment to that as well, and absolutely would work with anything that we passed. So I'm not hard and fast on that. What I do want, though, is to keep things as uncomplicated as possible, which is why I'm supporting the motion. I heard, when I questioned the Chief Executive before, the answers that I would hope we heard, and I hadn't put in his mouth. I heard that he would consult us in advance, where possible, which he thought would be the case most of the time, I believe, he said, and certainly inform us on every occasion immediately afterwards or as soon as physically practical. Now, the difference between the motion and the amendment is the amendment puts that as a legal requirement. I prefer to operate on a bit of trust here. We appointed the Chief Executive and renewed his contract a couple of times because we trusted him to do the job, and in this case, this is part of the job. I agree with the points that Rob and the Mayor made before, and I don't often say I agree with Rob on things, but in this case, I absolutely do. But I don't think we need to be prescriptive in order to get the result we want. So that's why I'm supporting the motion. But as I said, you know, I can live with either of the other two options if the majority wants that. But, and I guess someone mentioned before, well, it's a bit harder for the new councillors that don't know the Chief Executive, and that's probably some truth in that. I do know the Chief Executive. I've seen how he operates. I'm happy with the elected leadership sitting up at the top table there, that they will keep into account just as we will, and we'll have plenty of opportunities to do that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton. So poke the microphone a little bit. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Yeah, look, I agree. I think Koro Dave summed it up really nicely. I think I could live with either as well. I think everyone's intention is in the right place here. I do feel like we're slightly overcooking this a little bit. We can't legalise trust and prescribe trust. This is a very high trust environment. And I also have confidence that Richard will navigate the space with diligence and sensitivity to the general direction of us as elected members. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
You're in favour of which option?
The motion.
Thanks, mate. We're in here. Rightio. Yeah, thank you. There's been some pretty decent arguments either way, really, and the outcome, I think, is going to be quite similar. We're about to hit Control-Alt-Delete on our entire society, and we're about to hand the car keys to Richard. It's as pretty simple as that. It's do we want to or not, and are we going to tell him where to drive, or are we going to get opportunities to change course halfway through? And I'm not saying that as a funny soundbite or anything like that, but that's kind of the way I see it. The reason I asked the question about the decisions that Richard's had to make thus far, while we've all been hamstrung, gives me a kind of a guide as to what kind of thing to expect in the future. From what I can see, the kind of delegation that Richard's going to, or the kind of times he's going to have to call upon us, is when there are extraordinary and reasonably big decisions to make. For that reason, I'm quite happy with the motion the way it stands. My favourite of all of them actually is Margaret's foreshadowed amendment. So for that reason, I'll be supporting the motion in this case. And if that gets through, then I will hope Margaret's one gets through, but I'll live with the motion as well.
Thank you. Some great words have already been said, and I think at the end of the day, our democratic process and democratic rights are still being preserved and will still be executed on a daily basis, no matter which option we choose today. The reason I wanted to put forward option 3 was because I was wanting to strike some middle ground between having one delegated decision maker, the CEO, in all its options versions of consultation, and then having the widest group, and in my calculations takes into account around about 17 opinions or 17 positions. I think agility, flexibility, and being able to make decisions quickly in these unprecedented times is another reason why I suggested a cut-down version. It's not to cut out elected members' opinions and positions. That will still be preserved during our daily meetings and updates anyway. That is still preserved in the way we operate as a council through our committee type structure anyway. I mean, the committees have been set up so that we caucus, so that we take into account all opinions, and that opportunity is still there to bring that information up in my proposed amendment. Not quite. The experience that we had yesterday was another reason why I wanted to offer a more nimble option. And given that in 2 hours we had the opportunity to ask 2 questions, we didn't get involved in debate, and at the end of it I thought, well, crikey, this is a very long-winded, this is a very cumbersome process. How on earth are we going to arrive at decisions quickly and be fleet-footed about this when we have such a large group of people to involve? And actually, under the amendment, there is also provision for Maunga Māori to be included, which is fine, but if I take that into account under yesterday's conditions, then we would have had 3, possibly 4 more people involved in the conversation as well. So this is around, yes, trust, as we've already talked about, but it's more importantly, it's about agility, nimbleness, being able to make decisions quickly in unprecedented times of uncertainty, of our foundations being rocked, and my foreshadowed amendment, I believe, will help us get to that point.
We apologise for those watching.
Just bear with me and don't laugh. It's perhaps a quirky analogy. One of my favourite films is The Darkest Hour. And the notion, if you take 2 examples where you have to make an instant decision to evacuate the Dunkirk beaches, the Prime Minister, head of the military, does that straight away. If it's the big D-Day invasion, then that's a longer prep time. And I think I'm going to go with, and the other one too, that all of us must say, I love the word now, keep calm and carry on. And I think it's very important that we have that approach. And what I do like, as I understand it, and Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, the last bit of your amendment to option 1 says these consultation measures will be taken where reasonably practical. For clarity, the ultimate decision will nevertheless rest with the Chief Executive. And if you're looking at a so-called command structure in terms of things that have to be done absolutely urgently, legislation now gives the Mayor kind of executive powers. The Mayor is clearly not a first among equals. The Mayor is, by legislation, the Mayor, the leader in this situation. I would certainly expect in the first instance that the Chief Executive, in a case of urgency, would of course obviously be joined at the hip with the Mayor, and if she's incapacitated, obviously with the Deputy Mayor. Based on what we're going to have as a daily Zoom event, then I think Sarah's amendment is workable. Obviously, if the numbers are not there for Sarah's amendment, I would just go to option 1. And respectfully, in terms of the Forsyth amendment, I absolutely understand where she's coming from. But I think then we start to split hairs in terms of a sort of senior sort of 7 and a junior 7 and whatever. There's been some mention among Māori. I think it's very important in terms of the communities that they are speaking for and represent, along with the rest of us, that of course we want to have a reasonably and practical wide input on these decisions. But crystal clear, if something has to happen urgently, right, clearly the Chief Executive, in joined at the hip consultation with the Mayor, can exercise that, and we would get to know about that as soon as practicable. If in fact something doesn't have to have urgently, then clearly I think the Sarah amendment does give us appropriate checks and balances. But ultimately, and I pick up Dave's point, ultimately you have employed this guy, Chief Executive, with a series of powers, and I think you have to have a degree of trust. Clearly the checks and balances is going to be his relationship with the Mayor, and beyond that with the rest of us based on a daily or second daily Zoom type conference. So I will be supporting the Sarah amendment, and if that fails, then obviously I'll just be supporting option 1.
First time I've heard that one. All right, can you guys hear me okay? Right, so I support, great, thank you. I support Councillor Forsyth's foreshadowed amendment, but failing that, I'm also comfortable with the motion giving the CEO delegated authority. I think both will do the job. A key for me is ensuring this decision-making mechanism isn't unwieldy, especially in times of uncertainty. And at the same time, I think we can satisfy elected members' completely understandable concerns about being involved. The main concern, and rightly so, is elected members having a say. That message has been heard loud and clear, and I think we all agree with it. So if we can alleviate that concern, which I'm sure we can, let's go with a system that will give our staff the efficiency they need. I think we have to have some element of trust here. Implicit in Margaret's proposal is the fact that all elected members will be involved. Chairs will directly consult with deputies. In addition to that, we're all involved in daily Zoom conference calls. We all get the chance to express our views. I don't have any real issue with Maxine and Sarah's amendment, except I think it's just a bit too cumbersome. A key for me in supporting Councillor Forsyth's foreshadowed amendment is that it also allows for a minimum of just 2 elected members should things really hit the fan and should circumstances dictate that. So I just like that flexibility. I think Margaret's motion covers us well and I support it, but I'd also be completely comfortable with option 1, giving the CEO delegated authority.
Of reply to Councillor Pascoe.
Okay. Just very briefly, look, I've no doubts that the collaboration that we seek and the delegated authority sought in the amendment can be achieved as envisaged in the motion. I think here that And I think that we've had that undertaking today from the CE. And I'm agreeing with Dave on this, even though we're sitting apart, agreeing with Dave that the past performance of this CE confirms that we have got trust in his ability to act and to consult and to seek collaborated advice where he thinks it's appropriate to do so. I'm heartened by the comments from Mayor Paula, and I'm sure that she's in the know on this more than we are, that of the undertakings that have been given by the local government minister and from the DIA, that we will get changes that will allow council to meet in some form, which will then allow us to remove that delegated authority and to take extra responsibility away from Richard in these particularly difficult times. So my support obviously is for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We will go to the vote on the board, please. Oh, no, we can't go to the vote on the board. I'm sorry. We're going to go for the vote. It's all new. I'm going to go to the vote with a show of hands, and I will call out the hands that poke up on the screen for the remote people, and I'll tell the remote people how many hands are up around the room. So all those in favour of the amendment, which is the one proposed by Councillor Thompson and Van Oosden, please raise your hands. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 on screen, 5, 6 votes. So, yes, well, so 6 votes. So at the moment, in favour of that amendment, we have Councillor Thompson, Councillor Naidu-Rauf, Councillor Wilson, Councillor O'Leary, sorry, can you, the ones in the room, put your hand up, Councillor Van Oosden and Councillor Gallagher. All those opposed, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. So opposed is myself, Councillor Pascoe, Councillor McPherson, Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Bunting, Councillor Forsyth and Councillor Taylor. So what does that give us? Tell us, please.
The amendment is lost.
The amendment is lost. The motion becomes the substantive. We now bring to the table the foreshadowed amendment, which is Councillor Forsyth's foreshadowed amendment. And because I believe that we have had sufficient debate on all of the options, we won't do that debate again, but we will move to the vote. Oh, so all of those in favour of the amendment, which is the Forsyth Taylor amendment, please raise your hands. That is Councillor Taylor, Councillor Forsyth and Councillor Bunting. All of those opposed, please raise your hand. That is myself, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Naidu-Rauf, Councillor Pascoe, Councillor Van Oosden, Councillor McPherson, Councillor Ryan, Councillor Gallagher. And sorry, Councillor O'Leary and Councillor Sarah Thompson. You were blanked out for a minute.
So the amendment is lost.
The amendment is lost. So we now go to the substantive motion. All in favour, please raise your hands. That is everyone. Okay. The motion is carried. Thank you. Before we close the meeting, I'll see you guys all this afternoon. Please accept my assurances that I'll be working as harder than I have before, to make sure that you are kept in the loop of all decisions. And we'll talk again this afternoon. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you.
I need to look after myself now.
Done.
I've shaken my head off.